Okay, welcome to our Parsha study for the year 5786 Parsha cycle. We missed Bereshit because it came very close on the heels of Simchat Torah, but we are in Parshat Noach. And it was such a beautiful year of learning Nechama Leibowitz. And I was feeling a little nervous as I started to prepare for tonight. And I thought, well, we'll just try it for Bereshit. And I think I remembered, I didn't go back, but I think I have it in recording that I said that at the beginning of Nechama Leibowitz cycle as well, meaning it's always a little hard to start a new topic, but we had such success last year that I think we will enjoy this topic. But please feel free to give even more feedback than you might normally, although I think everyone feels comfortable, which is good. Because with a new topic, we might have to tweak things and fine tune them a little bit. Hello, Tamar and Jerry. Hello, Bobby. I was just noting that we're going to change topics for this year. The theme that I would like us to try, we'll see how it goes, is to study one mitzvah that appears in each parsha, so that at the end of the year we'll have studied whatever it is, 45, hopefully, maybe mitzvot. I should have looked up the exact number. And I think that it will be an interesting lens to look at the Torah. We often think of Breshit purely as this narrative arc. And I think that thinking about the mitzvot that appear and why they appear in these early parshiot might help us even look at the narrative in just a slightly different um, way, or a different, thinking about the narrative in a different way with the use of looking at the mitzvot. So the plan, we'll give it a try this week and for the next few weeks, is to identify a mitzvah, look at it in the parsha, sort of trace it through time a little bit, and end with a little bit of halacha study. So I think it will be a little bit different than last year, a lot different, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so Parshat Noach does not have many mitzvot in it. In fact, I was feeling a little nervous. I wondered if there were any mitzvot at all. And I found, I thought, of course, there are the Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach, which I don't think of as mitzvot for us as Jews, right? But there are the 7 mitzvot that we say apply to the children of Noach, the Noachides, as we call them. Um, And so then I thought, well, let's look at those 7 mitzvot. So it turns out that even that is a little bit tricky. Deciding which mitzvot they are, I was sort of disappointed. There's not like a chunk of Parshat Noach that says, and these are the mitzvot of Bnei Noach, and lists them out. But the Gemara talks about it in 2 places. One is in Avodah Zarah, which is a little bit of a lengthier treatment. So I brought us the discussion from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which talks about which mitzvot they are. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan. This is coming off another topic. I probably could have just deleted this first sentence, but the sages teach us in a Breita. Sheva mitzvot nitztavu b'nei Noach, right? There are 7 mitzvot that the children of Noach are commanded to observe. And these are them according to the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Dinin, the mitzvah of establishing courts of judgment. Ubirkat Hashem, the prohibition against blessing, i.e., cursing the name of God, right? We wouldn't, chas v'shalom, we would write cursing God's name. So we say blessing God's name, and we have to understand that that's like a euphemism for cursing God's name, right? So establishing courts, not cursing God's name, avodah zarah, not worshiping idols, gilui arayot, following the prohibitions against forbidden sexual relationships, right? So not having inappropriate sexual relationships, ushvichut damim, not killing people, gazel, not stealing or robbery, as it's listed here, ve'ever min hachai, and not eating a limb of a living animal. So those are the 7 that are sort of established in the Mishnah. There is an interesting strain, I didn't bring it here, in the Gemara that talks about maybe there were supposed to be 30 mitzvot for the Bnei Noach. And maybe those are like ambitious 30 mitzvot that someday in the future, when Mashiach comes, when there's a more ideal world, those will be the mitzvot that we observe, that they observe. But for now, it seems there are 7. The Rambam talks about these seven mitzvot in the Mishnah Torah, and interestingly, he understands it to be that only one extra mitzvah was added in the time of Noach, right? Because what he says is al shisha dvarim nitztava Adam harishon, that in fact all people for all of time in which there were people had six mitzvot, and here you can match them back up to the above, right? Avodah zarah, birkat Hashem, shvichut damim, gilui arayot, gezel, and dinim. Right, those are the ones that were always established, right? And if you look at a commentary, a lot of commentary about the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, it seems like the consensus is these are the things that keep society running, right? You need courts of law. You need not to murder each other. You need not to have like really icky relationships with your siblings or your parents or your children. And these are the very bare bones, the basics of what we need in a society. Mm. And the Rambam goes on to say, pisha kulan hein kabbalah biyadenu Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Even though we have received all of these commandments from Moshe, v'hadat noten lahen, and they are sort of natural ideas, concepts which intellect itself tends to accept. Miklal divrei Torah she'al elu nitztava. It appears from the Torah's words that these mitzvot were commanded to Adam. And then he goes on and he quotes our Parsha here. He says, Hosif lenoach ever min hachai. So what is the seventh, right? If it's Shiva mitzvot b'nei Noach, six come from Adam. The seventh one is the rule of not eating from the limb of a live animal. And in our Parsha, it says, Ach basar b'nafsho damo lo tochelu, right? Nevertheless, you may not eat flesh with its life, which is its blood. And so these are the seven mitzvot. Nimtzeu sheva mitzvot. V'chein haya hadavar b'chol ha'olam ad Abraham. And that this is sort of the seven basic laws of humanity until we get to Abraham Avinu. And when Abraham gets to us, and we'll see this, maybe we'll learn this mitzvah when we come to it, nitztavu yeter al elu b'milah. Then we add the mitzvah of Bri Milah. Vahu hitpalal shachri. And then interestingly, we add the mitzvah of davening shachri. And then his son Yitzchak, hifrish ma'aseh v'hosif tefillah acheret lifnot hayom. Yitzchak adds an extra davening later in the day of mincha. V'Yaakov, his son, right, hosif gid hanasheh v'hitpalal arvit. Maybe we'll look at gid hanasheh, right, that from the story of Yaakov wrestling, we learn that you can't eat the sciatic nerve of an animal, and also the mitzvah of davening mariv. Mitzrayim nitzavu Amram b'mitzvot yeterot. And then in Egypt, Amram was commanded regarding other mitzvot, extra mitzvot. Ad shaba'a Moshe Rabbeinu v'nishalma Torah al yado. And then when Moshe comes, we fill in the rest of the details. Right, so we pick up some mitzvot over time with all of our ancestors, and then at the end we get the rest of the set. Okay, so far we've established what the Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach are, perhaps where they come from. Certainly, it seems like a very ancient tradition, even if it's first described after the flood with b'nei Noach. But what I want to look at today is actually not what they are, although that would be tempting. These are all interesting mitzvot, but what is not here. And I will be perfectly transparent that there is a beautiful set of shiurim on the Torah Etzion website, which is called the Mitzvah of the Week by Rav Tabori, and he goes through a mitzvah every week. I certainly intend to use his resources liberally over the year. And he notes that there's an interesting mitzvah that is not here, that he thinks that the B'nai Noach, Noachites, are actually renowned for following. And that is the mitzvah of Kibbud Aveim. Right? So he says, well, if the seven don't include Kibbud Aveim, why not? Right? And he lays out for us two really great examples, one from our Parsha and one from a few weeks from now, of people that are not considered to be part of our religious tradition, right? It's like a little anachronistic to call Yaakov or Avraham a Jewish person, right? But at least a part of the ancestors of our tradition, who are really good at Kibbud Aveim. So the first one, this comes from our Parsha. I'm committed to at least reading a part of our Parsha every week, even if we're looking at a mitzvah. And this is the story of when Noach becomes drunk, right? So the story of this week's Parsha, Noach goes on the boat. He builds the boat. He goes on the boat. The flood comes. Everything's destroyed. He sends out the birds. He gets off the boat, right? And he builds a vineyard. And then it tells us, Vayesh min hayayin vayishachar, that Noach drinks of the wine and becomes drunk. V'yitzgal b'toch ahalo, and he uncovers himself inside of his tent. V'yar cham avi Canaan et ervat aviv, v'yagid l'shnei achav bachutz. So we know that Noach has three children, and the first child, Ham, who becomes the father of Canaan, he sees his father naked, and what does he do? He tells his two brothers outside. Presumably, like, oh, haha, look at dad. He got so drunk and now he's naked, right? Totally not Kibbud Avim. But what do his other two sons do? Vayarch, v'yikach Shem v'yafet et hasimla, v'yasimu al Shechem shnehem, v'yalchu achronit v'yichasu et ervat avihem. So they take cloth, they put it on their own backs, and then they walk backwards and they cover their father's nakedness. Why did they walk backwards? Because they have such kibbud avim that even if they're going to cover their father up, they don't want to see him in that state. And so they devise this plan where they can walk backwards and cover him and be respectful without also having to disrespect him by looking at him in that way. And then Vayiketz Noach, the next morning, Noach wakes up miyeno from his wine, from his drunkenness. V'yeda et asher asalo beno hakatan, and he learns what his youngest son had done to him. Right, he's aware. So generally, we understand Shem and Yafet to be doing this enormous mitzvah of kibbud av, right? They could have joined Ham in doing this terrible thing, and instead they were very respectful. And Rashi goes so far as to say that the vayikach, where it says, it doesn't say vayikchu, right, which is the plural that Shem and Yafet took together, but just he took. And this is to teach, according to Rashi, that actually Shem was more into it than Yafet. Yafet maybe helped, but really Shem is the one who took the thing. And what do we learn from this? Shehu nita met b'mitzvah yoter miyafet, right? He was more devoted in this than Yafet. L'chach zachu banav l'talit shel tzitzit. So Rashi learns from this that Shem's sons had the privilege of wearing tzitzit. And the sons of Yafet were privileged to receive honorable burials. So I guess in Rashi's sort of hierarchy, wearing tzitzit is a bigger mitzvah than having this zachal k'vura levanav, and that's how it is explained. But either way, both sons get an enormous prize, enormous reward for having kibbud av. Okay, so that is from our Parsha. Now we're going to go into the world of the rabbis. I think this is a fun diversion, a good part of learning this mitzvah, which is the rabbis like to tell stories where like everyone outdoes each other, right? I was the best at doing this until I found someone who did it a little bit better. And we can learn from the rewards that are meted out to these different people, how good their actions were. So in Devarim Rabbah, so on a slightly different topic, but same idea, we talk about Esav. So again, when we think about the narrative arc of the story of Breshit, Esav plays a very, very tiny role and not a very complimentary role, according to most Mefarshim, right? Esav is thought of as the bad guy, the one who isn't deserving. He gets what's coming to him when Yaakov steals his bracha. And sometimes we do try to look at him in different angles. I was even remembering when we did the Haftarah, we talked about how Rome is compared to Esav, or Esav is compared to Rome. And what a bad rap Esav gets. But here, when looking at the story through the lens of mitzvah, we actually are going to give very high praise to Esav. So a little bit unexpected in, I think, a good way. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is talking, and he says, Lo kibed bria et avotav kamo ani et avotai. It's such like a bold statement. No person respects his parents like I respected my parents, right? He's like a very not humble brag from Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. But then he admits, umatzati shekived Esav la'aviv yoter mimeni. But I actually found that Esav honored his father even more than I did, which is like a very long and not humble way of saying Asaph is probably the most humble, the most kavodic person to his father. Ketzad, how is this? What was the way that he did this? Amar ben Shimon ben Gamliel, hayiti mishamesh et aviv bekelim tsoim. Right, I would serve my father with soiled garments on. וכשהייתי הולך לשוק, הייתי משליך אותן הכלים ולובש כלים נאים ויוצא בהן. Right? He says, well, I was really good at serving my father, but I didn't get like dressed up for him. I would wear my sweatpants in the house and serve my father. And then when I went to the market, I would put on my nice clothes. אבל עשיו לא היה עושה כן, but עשיו didn't do this, אלא אותן כלים שהיה לובש ומשמש בהן את אביו, הן מעולים. Right? That the garments that he would wear to serve his father were finer than the garments he would wear to the market. That when he got home and he was going to give his dad dinner, right, Yitzchak dinner, he would put on his nicest clothes to honor his father even more. And then he might change into dirty clothes to go get at, go out in the world and get even dirtier in the marketplace. So it's an interesting proof. The Dvarim Rabbah goes on to explain, right? It sort of explains why Rivka has Yaakov change into Esav's clothes because maybe they felt nicer, maybe like they were linen instead of a coarser material or something like that. But no matter how we think about Esav, right, often we do point out Yitzchak loved Esav, and presumably because, as Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, he would serve his father. And so this extra bit of serving him in nice clothes, like it's sort of the cherry on top that makes him the best son in the world in Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel's experience. But certainly he's someone to be praised. And so I think that Tabori is asking in his essay, and I have a link to it at the end for anyone who wants to read more, is why would these B'nai Noach go out of their way to do Kibbud Avayim if it's not commanded of them? Right? There's this assumption that we do things because they're commanded, not only because they make sense or they're good for us. So those are the two examples from our Sefer, from Sefer Bereshit. But I brought one more really great story from Kiddushin. I apologize. I have some post-Simchat Torah hoarseness still. So in Kiddushin it says, Amar Rabbi Huda, Amar Shmuel, right? Rabbi Huda says that Rabbi Shmuel said, Sha'alu et Rabbi Eliezer, that the students of Rabbi Eliezer asked him, Ad heichan kibud aveim, how far do you have to go in honoring one's parents? Amar lahem, Tzu'u u'ru'u ma asa nachri echad la'aviv ba'ashkelon. He says, well, listen, see what this one nochri, what this one non-Jewish person did for his father in Ashkelon. Dama ben Netina Shmo. His name was Dama ben Netina, right? So when Rabbi Eliezer can answer this question, he could have said Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is a really good son, right, by his own admission, or he could have talked about some person in the Torah or in his own time period who was Jewish, but he chooses Dafka to tell the story of this man named Dama ben Netina who is not Jewish. I think it's really actually quite beautiful in a lot of ways to recognize the powers and strengths of people around you. What is the story? It's a great story. Bikshu mimenu chachamim avanim le'efod b'shishim riba sachar. So sorry, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm sorry I didn't do that at the beginning. The Chachamim, so the Jewish rabbis, wanted to purchase some stones from Dama ben Netina for the ephod of the Kohen Gadol, right? It's like sort of interesting to think about. Obviously, it has to be sourced from somewhere, but I didn't think about us going to like buy these stones in the marketplace. They felt like these very holy things that had been put together many hundreds of years ago. But maybe some of the stones fall out. Maybe the Kohen needed a new one, whatever it was. They bring with them 600,000 gold dinars. And they say to, and perhaps Rav Kahana says, Matnei B'Shimon Riba, right? Maybe it was 800,000. Either way, They go to Dama ben Natina and they say, we'd like to buy your precious stones, right? He's a merchant. And this is the amount of money we have, 600 or 800,000 dinar. והיה מפתח מונח תחת מראשותיו של אביו. Unfortunately, the key to the chest that holds these precious jewels was under the head of Dama ben Natina. Velo tsiaro, and he doesn't want to disturb his father, right? He has this choice. Should he pull the key out from under his father's head and perhaps wake his father up, or should he decline the business? And it seems he declines the business. He says, no, I'm sorry, I can't get the key right now. לשנה האחרת, נתן הקדוש ברוך הוא שכרו שנולדה לו פרה אדומה בעדרו. But the next year, the Holy One, blessed be He, gave Dama ben Natina his reward because he had a red heifer in his herd, right? The Jewish people needed the para aduma to make a purification ritual at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And so Nichnasu Chachmei Yisrael Etzlo. Again, the rabbis come to him. Amar lahem, Yodea ani bachem she'im ani mevakesh michem kol mamon sheba'olam atem nodnin li. אלא אין אני מבקש מכם, אלא אותו ממון שהפסדתי בשביל כבוד אבא. Right? He says, I know that if I asked you for an exorbitant amount of money, you would give it to me. But all I want is that 600 or 800,000 dinar that I lost when I honored my father. ואמר רבי חנינא, ומה מי שאינו מצווה ועושה? כך מצווה ועושה על אחת כמה וכמה. Right? And so what Rabbi Chanina learns from this story is if Dama ben Natina, who's not Jewish and is perhaps not obligated in the mitzvah of Kibbud Av, if he got such a reward for having Kibbud Avim, how much more of a reward would the Jewish people get if they honored their parents, right? Because the principle in Judaism is if we are obligated, we get a greater reward than if we are not obligated. The Amar Rabbi Chanina, sorry, right, here we go. The Amar Rabbi Chanina, Gadol mitzuveh v'oseh mi she'enu mitzuveh v'oseh. Right? And so it seems clear to Rabbi Chanina that the non-Jewish people are not obligated in Kibbud Avim, right? It does not appear on the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. But we have this beautiful story of Dama ben Natina, which shows what a great reward someone would get for doing Kibbud Avim. So if we just look at the stories that the rabbis bring us of Shem and Yafet, and then of Esav, and then of these non-Jewish merchant who sort of appears in many different forms in different stories, who do this enormous amount of Kibbud Avim, it seems like a very good thing. So now I hope that we'll do this in every class. We'll finish with the halachic application, right? We've looked at the Torah, we've looked at the Gemara, but what is the actual halacha about this? So interestingly, this overlaps, it intersects with the idea of converts, right? Because the halacha is not going to legislate what non-Jews should or should not do as mitzvot, but a ger, someone who used to be not Jewish and is now Jewish, definitely falls under our legislative purview. And the Mishnah Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, and I brought them both here, right? The Mishnah Torah writes first, the Shulchan Aruch goes on to codify. The Shulchan Aruch follows the Rambam very often, and here you'll see almost entirely copies and pastes from the Rambam here. It's not always the case, so I decided to bring them both so we can see in case in the future we want to see a difference, a distinction. The Rambam says, Hager asur lekalel aviv. Ha'akum v'lahakoto. So now here, we're going to make an interesting distinction between what I would call like passive Kibbud Avim and active Kibbud Avim. Right, so active Kibbud Avim is not taking the key from under his head, or is wearing your finest clothes, or is making sure not to have your father see your father's nakedness, right? You're taking extra steps to show your kavod. Passive kavod is like simply deciding not to curse or strike your father, right? Just sort of neutrality. So perhaps, and I think that I was thinking about this a lot today, that we treat converts and their families, I think, very differently, latova, in a good way, than we used to, which is like it used to be that you were expected to sort of relinquish your connection to your family when you converted, your non-Jewish family. And I think that in today's world, we acknowledge that, that's a very difficult thing to do, and we're not quite as strict about that idea. But at the time of the Rambam, you weren't expected to honor your parents anymore, but you certainly couldn't curse or strike them. And his reason for this, I'm not sure I fully understand it. It's what's copied over in the Yoredeya, is velo yivazehu kadesha lo yomru ba'u mikudusha chamura lekudusha kala. Shaharei zeh mevazeh aviv. Right? We don't want people to say that they came from a more severe level of holiness to a lesser level of holiness because this person degrades his father. Eila noheg bo miktsat kavod. So the bottom line is that there are certain measures of honor, sort of like what I would call passive measures of honor, that need to be followed when you are a convert, when your parent is not Jewish, right? So we see that the Rambam doesn't think Kibbud Avim is a mitzvah, but that the sort of like lack of negative total dishonor is in some way obligated of this person. And then the Igro Moshe, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, right, the halachic decider of the 1900s, writes about this topic. I went looking for it. I needed to give myself a little more time. The Igor Moshe, sadly, is not yet on Sefaria, so it's not quite as easy for me to get my hands on it, but I will in the future strive to because his questions are really cool and they have really great answers. And I hope that we'll also explore some other modern poskim and maybe some other commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch as we delve into more mitzvot. But here I gave you the link, which I hopefully you can click on. If you can't, I will. Why don't I put it also in the chat? This is the article of Rabbi Tabori's on this week's mitzvah. And I sort of picked and chose what I thought was interesting for Parsha Shiur. But here he explains Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's idea. He says Rav Moshe Feinstein deals with the concept of partial honor, right? This is what we saw in the Rambam. Whoops, that it's miktsat kavod, right? Certain measures, partial honor, and suggests that all kibbud av is predicated upon the mitzvah of the concept of gratitude, which is certainly a value incumbent upon all mankind. So I thought that was a super interesting idea. First of all, it's an excellent jumping off point to remind everyone that I should have started this year by saying Chodesh Tov. We are now headed into the month of Mar Cheshvan, which is traditionally known as a bitter month because nothing good or bad happens in it. No mitzvot, no chagim, and no fast days. And that we have developed a custom at Skokie Valley to offer daily gratitude for little things, not big things, but little things. And I hope that you'll join me. There's a WhatsApp group. If you'd like to be a part of it, you can let me know. So I loved that Rav Moshe spoke about the concept of gratitude, but also tying Kibbud Av to gratitude. That on some level, right, he's just as the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach are like building blocks of a decent society. It seems like what Rav Moshe is saying is everyone should express gratitude. Whether it's your particular mitzvah or not, this is a value incumbent upon all mankind, and I certainly agree. Despite the lack of an explicit commandment for Jews or Noachites to act morally or ethically, there are obvious moral obligations that apply to all mankind, right? So there's no mitzvah that says be a mensch. But there are lots of mitzvot that help us build to being a mensch, right? There is no mitzvah that says be gracious, have gratitude, but we find it sort of embedded in these laws. And the fact that there's this miktsat kavod that is due to non-Jewish parents seems to indicate that to Rav Moshe. While the laws of Kibbud Av, which apply to Jews, are specifically detailed, a Noachide must only show partial honor to demonstrate his gratitude to his parents. Right? No matter what you think about your parents, whether you want to be a kavadik or not, you cannot strike or curse your parents because of all that they gave you, starting with life and then presumably sustenance and diapers and whatnot for the first years of your life, education and, food and a roof over your head and hopefully some training in life, that like you always must have that partial honor. So this was a little bit of like an interesting twist on a mitzvah of the Parsha because the mitzvot are the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, which we did not actually delve into. But I thought this idea of whether We are all obligated in Kibbud of Ve'em. Was an interesting one to start with. So again, I would welcome any thoughts or questions or ideas that you have on these sources, but also if you would like to share now or later, whether you felt like this worked for you or it was boring or you wish there was more of one thing or another, I would really love to hear because I would love to tailor it to our group as best as possible. Now I'm going to stop talking and I would love to hear what other people have to say. Oh, Nelson, you're muted, but I would love to hear you.
Yeah. Since the beginning, I was bothered by one thing. I always thought of the Noahide laws as being the basic behavioral laws that separate evolving mankind from the animal world. And I didn't remember all of them, but today I was expecting that sacrifice of children. And I know the Canaanites used to throw children to the fire for Moloch and things like that. And they were not mentioned here. I think it would come for, I don't know, maybe Abraham later. Maybe the Akedah has something to do with this, or later, but the Torah was given, that was totally abhorrent and forgiven. So I don't know if the fact that Ham was the father of Canaan, the Canaanites were the ones that were more responsible for those horrible sacrifices, the whole pagan sacrifices and rituals that were eventually forbidden.
It's a great point. I wonder if the Avodah Zarah mitzvah sort of is an umbrella under which that would fall, right? Meaning that is certainly Avodah Zarah to offer human sacrifice. But I also think that you're right, right? Meaning that I think sort of like that piece of the Rambam that talks about how Avraham brought Brit Milah and Shacharit, maybe we could say Avraham brought the end of that practice as well. Maybe it was really allowed under the rules of the Bnei Noach.
Yeah.
Which is troubling, right? Because as we think about building blocks, I would agree with you. That feels like a pretty crucial one.
Yeah. Well, incest and robbery, thieving, that was all the basic civilizational attribute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, wouldn't it prohibition against bloodshed cover that? I mean, you're killing someone, or
I think the intersection between the bloodshed and the Avodah Zarah like feels like it should cover it on some level, but it's not explicit. I would agree with you. But again, if you're only going to have 7, you have to somehow sort of choose how to frame them. Maybe that's what prompted the rabbis to say there were 30, right? Is they couldn't decide just 7.
Yeah.
I thought the issue of not eating a limb from a live animal was interesting because animals don't eat from a live animal. They don't. They kill their prey first. So I was
not even birds?
Well, I was on a birding trip and we were having a picnic lunch and we were watching a hawk who had caught a bird or small prey and it was bashing its head against the ground to kill it before it took it up into the tree to eat it. It killed it first. It killed it first. And then the Big Bear Valley eagles that I was watching with their chicks all last winter, they brought a dead squirrel. They caught it. The eagle caught a squirrel, killed it, and brought the dead squirrel to the nest. Animals don't eat from a live animal. They kill it first. So that was interesting. That would be in there because not even animals do that, eat from a live person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question, right? Meaning if these are the things, as Nelson said, that separate us from the animals, then that one feels like maybe
the animals are
relevant
better than us.
But it shows it shows human brain work though. They didn't have refrigerators at the time. So if they eat a limb and then they're full and they kill the animal, then the rest of the meat is going to be spoiled. But if they keep the animal alive and keep cutting off a leg here and an arm there or whatever, they could be eating fresh meat.
Is that true, Sherry? Like, how long could the animal live as you keep hacking off its limbs?
I don't know.
Maybe
But that's the
that's
reason,
true.
but
Maybe
that's the
that's
reason
true.
they did it, I think.
I wonder
I
if,
also think animals only take prey for what they can eat and for what they need to feed their chicks.
So like an eagle wouldn't kill a dog because it can't eat a whole dog. It would only kill a squirrel. You know, I wonder if in some ways this is separating us from the animals because humans maybe had an inclination that was too animalistic. And so God was sort of protecting Bnei Noach from themselves. You might become even worse than the animals if I let you. And so I'm explicitly telling you not to do it. I don't know. Tamara and Jerry, were you going to say something?
I was very surprised by, at one point, there was a reference, a positive reference about Esav, as far as the honor he gave his father. I
Yeah.
think there are certain personalities in the Torah, when you hear the Mefarshim speak about them, it's only negative, only negative. I think this is the first time I heard or saw a positive reference about Esav.
Yeah. And like the most glowing, right? Not just like he was okay, but like he was the best at this.
Yeah.
I think it's shocking. I was feeling nervous about this new mitzvah class and that maybe we should just go back to our Nachama Leibowitz, which we knew we loved. But that source is sort of what sealed the deal for me that this was like a cool new way to look at the Parsha. Because I think when we think about the Parsha, we want to take these lessons. And so the rabbis were really invested in like bad guys and good guys because those make better lessons, right? Like better midot lessons. But when the rabbis were not concerned about the storyline of Breshit, it seems like they gave Esav a lot more credit for the things he did because there was less at stake in terms of parshanut on the parsha. Um, yeah, I think that this is one of the few, I'm going to go and look now, I'm curious, one of the few references pre-modern era that is positive about Esav. And all in his observance of a mitzvah he was not even commanded in. I do also think there's something a little bit awkward, like clunky about saying Esav is a Noachite and Yaakov is a Israelite, right? Like, what does that mean? They're brothers of the same parents. How could one be a Bnei Noach and one be a Bnei Israel? But I understand the point.
They were twins.
Right, right. How could twins, one be a Bnei Noach and not the other?
I have another point regarding what Bobby said about animals killing other animals before they ate them. How do you explain the case of Jonah and the whale? He was eaten whole by the whale. You don't have to answer that.
The ultimate case of Ever Min HaChai. Well, he didn't eat just the Aver. He ate the whole thing, Chai.
Yeah, we can wait till Rosh Hashanah to discuss that.
That's right. I have a whole year. Yeah, I think the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach often don't get a lot of attention, both because they don't really apply to us, so we don't have to worry about the details, and because there are so many other interesting things in the Parsha that it gets lost. So my hope is that we'll find these sort of interesting things that might have gotten lost otherwise, and we'll be able to give them a little bit of time and thought. So I hope this was good. Please feel free to give me feedback, but next week we'll pick a mitzvah from Lech Lecha, the next Parsha. And as I said, tonight begins the Rosh Chodesh of Mar Cheshvan. If you would like to be in the gratitude WhatsApp, I encourage you to join it. Just let me know, and I'm happy to add you, where we have a daily gratitude practice for the month of Cheshvan to celebrate the small things, not the big things in life. And I think I'm just going to pull up the details for anyone who would like to join a Beit Midrash program, not run through Skokie Valley, but through Pardes, which I'm sure Bobby can sing Pardes's praises as well as I can. It is starting, let's see. They're learning the first 2 chapters of Masechet Bava Batra. And the series is called What Makes Good Neighbors. And it's 8 Sundays, beginning next Sunday, going through December 21st from 7 to 9 p.m. at Skokie Valley. And it will be taught by Rabbi Will Friedman, who was a peer of mine and my husband Will's at Pardes. He's a really excellent teacher. You don't need to have any experience studying Gemara, although I know all of you do. And you do not need to attend them all. So if you are interested, I highly recommend checking it out. Starting this Sunday at 7 p.m. Rabbi Will Friedman from Pardes will be teaching the series on Bava Batra.
And there was a mailing that was sent out by Skokie Valley to register. So
Yes.
maybe another mailing should be sent out with the Friday bulletin.
I think it will go in the Friday bulletin.
Yeah.
And it should be, I think it would be quite good. I'm sad that I'll be missing it. I think that's all the news that's fit to print, as they say. So I wish everyone a wonderful end of your week. I hope you have excellent travels in Brazil, Nelson, and we wish you a safe Nesiat Tova when you do return, but enjoy your time with your family. And we wish Nichumim to Sherry, who lost her brother this week, and we learned in his memory, Bruce's memory.
Thank you.
And Neshama should have an aliyah. And an early Shabbat Shalom. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Yael.
Shalom.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Sounds
Nice
like going to be a
to see
great
everyone.
year.
Yes, amen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.